I'm glad to have you back. I'm your host, K-Town, and you're listening to Mysterious Radio. We're going to be changing the format of the show just a bit, where it's more intimate, and you're going to hopefully feel that at the beginning of the show, which requires me to lean in a little more and for you to hear my voice a little more. And in the way that I interview my guest, I hope that it makes you want to tell your friends that it is an enjoyable experience, even if you do not agree with anything that my guest is discussing, but that you appreciate the fact that I'm bringing these people to you and allowing you to ultimately make up your own mind, which is very, very important in this day and age where you see others being censored all the time. I will never do that. I do try my best before I interview a guest to let them know that it is very important that they feel like they are in a safe space and that I won't judge them. This is a no judgment zone, and that you guys won't judge them, okay? Because I want them to say whatever is on their mind. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life every week. All right. My special guest tonight is William Ramsey, and he's returning to the show to discuss Aleister Crowley, who was a controversial occultist and a ceremonial magician. And many say he was a traitor to the British people. And we're going to hear all about his dark behavior right now.
My name is William Ramsey. My first book that I published almost 10 years ago was titled Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order. And it goes back, it's basically a biography about Crowley. His real name was Edward Crowley. He was born in England in 1875, but he went on to kind of become one of the more famous, if not the most famous modern occultist. And he died in 1947. So I really kind of went through and tried to go back and get my own view of what he was really up to. He's a complex individual who really never had a normal job. He came from a wealthy family. His dad sold beer and kind of like snacks throughout the pub system in England. And so it afforded Crowley, who was an only child, kind of the best of the best. And he was a member of what was called the Plymouth Brethren, which it actually was a subsect of the Plymouth Brethren. By a guy, it was a subsect called the Exclusive Brethren, and the original teacher was John Nelson Darby. Might be familiar to some people. He was kind of the original dispensationalist, and he had a kind of a very rigid religious structure. His father was a pamphleteer for this kind of version of Christianity, so he went around and preached. And unfortunately for Crowley, his father died when he was 12. He was left in the care of his mother, and he didn't like the care of his mother or his uncle who took over his life. So he kind of had some problems with that, but he came from a rigid background. He was able, with the family money, to go to the best private schools. They would call them public schools in England, but the best private undergraduate style schools. So he was well tutored and trained. He went into Cambridge, was one of the schools in the city of Cambridge for the Exclusive Brethren. So he was in this kind of rigid environment there. He didn't do well. He got very sick. So he had real problems with the kind of structure that he grew up with. He was able to get into Cambridge. And while he was at Cambridge with all these other people, the future King of England, he said, "Here I am among the glories of the past, and I intend to be one of the glories of the future." So with family money, he really never had to work. So he was involved in really three things. He thought of himself as a poet, and he wrote and published many books of poetry. He was also involved at the beginning with mountain climbing, and he did a variety of different ascents throughout Europe and actually in the Himalayas. And it was also the occultism. So he's fascinated with the occult, and kind of went in and joined these orders. He heard about this group called the Golden Dawn, which was an early magical group. And he joined the Golden Dawn with some other luminaries, like Butler was William Butler Yeats was one who was became a much more famous poet than Crowley. But so he was in there kind of with this elite. It's a post Masonic order, so you kind of went through Masonry and then into the Golden Dawn, and that really influenced Crowley. He took a lot of the information and ideas and rituals and kind of used them for himself and started his own order right at the turn of the century.
Yeah. And
that was called the AA, or Astrum Argentum, or Silver Star would be the translation. And so he just kind of went forward. He was really the pivotal event in his life is something that happened to him in 1904 in Egypt after going.
Hold on, don't say that yet.
Okay.
Hold on that, because I want to ask you something before you go too far.
Okay.
You said that was like the Golden Dawn was, I guess it was like something that the elite were in. Who else in that period of time would you consider elite that we may know of?
I think one was Bram Stoker, or Abraham Stoker, the guy who wrote Dracula, was involved in that.
Really?
William Butler Yeats, I think, is most like he had some very, very famous poetry and also mixed kind of with the elite. But those are two people who come to mind that the public would probably know who were involved in the Golden Dawn.
Okay, so what do you think was the draw to joining something like that? I mean, do you know what they were wanting to accomplish? I mean, what was their goal?
I think the Golden Dawn represents this Golden Dawn of these new ideas that were circulating at the end of the 19th century. So a lot of ideas came from the East. The Golden Dawn was influenced by Blavatsky. And so they were trying to have this wisdom, but also practice magic. So they were involved in ritual magic, and I think for power, and also just to satisfy their curiosity. And I think it's an important element in understanding kind of elite behavior, because most of those people were educated and part of the upper level social structure. But I think that's really, they were kind of just adventurers in this kind of magic that didn't really exist in organized societies. Maybe the Illuminati or something like that had rituals back in the 18th century. But the Golden Dawn, at least in Western Europe, was a remarkable point, and it's still being practiced today. Golden Dawn magic. There's outfits in the United States that are affiliated with the Golden Dawn, so it's still kind of around. But I think that's really what Crowley was doing, was the seeking of knowledge, and really becoming this kind of occult expert. And I think that's what he was trying to do. What these other people, like if you listen to Yeats, it's pretty remarkable, because his poetry, he said, magic was all that I was and all that I did. He was really using these magical techniques to kind of inflame his mind and inspire his poetry. So, and Crowley himself, I think, used magic to get what he wanted to, whatever it was, money, relationships, anything like that. So I think that's really was the attraction for people, and kind of moving away from what they had as kind of the Christian worldview. This was an opportunity for people to move away from maybe what they thought of as state, or a religion that didn't have any modern impact for them. So I think there's a lot of different reasons that people got involved in the Golden Dawn.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. Where was he conducting his ceremonial practices? I mean, do you know the locations?
Well, so it was in London, and they used these Masonic orders, or the Masonic halls. One was right outside of Buckingham Palace that I remember. There were different temples throughout England, but I think that the original temple was in London, and I don't remember offhand right now what the actual place was, but yeah, there was definitely affiliated with the Masonry.
Okay. I saw a picture of him when he was younger, and he was in his his ceremonial robes and things like that. He really reminded me of the young guy that they portray in Harry Potter.
Tom Riddle.
Tom Riddle. There you go. Tom Riddle. Yes, he reminds me so much of him. I'm wondering if.
Well, it's an interesting connection, because there is kind of a Crowley connection into Harry Potter, actually.
Really?
Or magic. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Harry Potter himself. So I mean, that's kind of a tangent, but Potter is alchemical, so you're clay, working clay. So Harry Potter, that's his name. So it's alchemy, and there's all kinds of other things involved in there, 5 and the 6. So Harry Potter's name is an 11, which is Crowley's number of magic as well, or really just the number of magic. So the writer of Harry Potter was very smart. She knew a lot of stuff. And I think one of the figures in there is really taken as kind of a exemplar of Crowley. I can't remember the character's name, but it goes on and on. The wand that Harry picks out is 11 inches long. So there's all kinds of 11s. She was very smart from the very beginning, from that first book. She integrated tons of Western esoteric magical ideas, no doubt.
That is interesting. Is she interested in, I mean, do you know if she attends some of these ceremonial?
That's an open question. I mean, there's a lot of good questions. It's kind of like you're back in Shakespeare. Like, who really wrote this book? Is her story about being a single mother writing this book out at a coffee shop while she was on, welfare really true? Because I remember that she was friends with somebody else. So somebody might have been feeding her ideas. And that first book is very skilled. And the Sorcerer's Stone is like a play on the Philosopher's Stone, which is something that Western esotericism is involved in. So there's some open questions, but I've heard her literally say, and it's in one of her documentaries about her. It says, I always want to see a little bit of magic in people. I don't remember the verbatim statement. Yeah, so she knows. She's much more savvy about the occult and Western magic than maybe the public would believe or know. I think it would be very scandalous if people really understood. In a lot of ways, when you read Harry Potter, you're getting an introduction into Western magical tradition.
That's right.
Really.
You're exactly right. Yeah. I've heard that before.
Yeah, you're being initiated, and I've heard some of those magical things that she put in there are literal spells.
Spells, yeah, I heard it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, literal spells, and they're speaking them out, and kids are listening to, adults are listening to them. It's weird because, I've always wondered, did she study occult history? What kind of influences did she have upon making 8 movies out of this stuff? I
think those are the number 1 best-selling books of all time, really. I think worldwide, it's a global phenomenon. It's very remarkable that she had it down settled. And like when you travel to Hogwarts, you go to the train station and you get in something called 9 3/4, right?
Yeah, right.
And 93 is Crowley's number. 93 is Crowley's number. That was an important number for him because in the Kabbalah, there's a subset of the Kabbalah called Gematria where words have numerical value. And so 2 of the most important words for Crowley were agape, which is love, and that in Greek translates to 93. And then the will is thelema, which in Greek translates to 93. So a lot of these guys will use the number 93 as kind of a sign-off. Instead of saying love under law, love under will, they say 93, 93. So you see that in Harry Potter. So there's a lot. There's a lot. She was very smart. I mean, she wrote it when she was 32. I know she has a classics background. I think she has a degree in classics.
Yeah.
But how much she's exposed, how much English people are exposed. Like Crowley is considered in the 100 greatest Englishmen who've ever lived, right? And so in these kind of rankings of important people, Crowley's there. And a lot of people may be exposed to it much more than I did. I didn't really know much about the deeper understanding of Crowley probably until I was 40.
Yeah. Well, we're going to call a thing a thing. I mean, there's too many coincidences for her not to have looked at that or studied him, or someone is feeding her this information and deliberately putting that in the movie, probably to influence the masses. It's pretty wicked, man. What about the Book of Law?
So that's that. Yeah. So the Book of the Law was kind of Crowley's core book. When he was in Cairo in Egypt, and he had been in the king's chamber inside the main pyramid there. I think it's the pyramid of Giza pyramid. He had come out, and his wife, whose name was Kelly, her last name was Kelly, she whispered to him, "They are waiting for you." And so he starts asking her these questions. Who's waiting? He proceeds to do a ritual in his apartment in Cairo. And over 3 days, in 1904, I think it was April of 1904, he said that some entity dictated to him a book that he titled the Book of the Law, which references the chief book in Masonry. So he's using that same terminology. So you make oaths on the book of the law in Masonry. So he called it his book of the law in 3 parts in 3 days. He said that some entity had power over him. He just wrote it down. And those writings are actually available. You can see that he's kind of scribbling almost as automatic writing. And you can see that in my documentary about Crowley, which is Prophet of Evil. It's on Vimeo. And so he wrote this down. That became a central piece. It was dictated to him by a being he called Aiwaz, A-I-W-A-Z. And it became this kind of central focus of a lot of his future religion. And so the rituals he wrote for the AA and later the OTO always involved the Book of the Law, and that became a referential piece. And it's very vicious. It's broken up into 3 parts based upon what he called the Stela of Revealing, which was in the Bulaq Museum. Back then it was called the Bulaq Museum. It's now called the Egyptian Museum, which had all these old artifacts. And that Stela of Revealing was in a bookcase that was numbered 666. So all these tie-ins kind of, and Crowley would later call himself the Great Beast 666, referencing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these tie-ins, and that became kind of that's how he called himself a prophet. He was a prophet of Aiwaz. This book was announcing a new aeon, which is like a new era, like even a broader, more, I would say a more aggressive era for sure, but a very an era that would last a long time. So he was trying to announce the magical era. He was its prophet, which is why I titled my book Prophet of Evil, because he was going to create this new religion. And he really did create a new religion, and with the intent in part to overthrow Christianity. And so that was really what happened in 1904. And people still go back, like Jimmy Page went to Egypt on that exact date that Crowley received the Book of the Law 100 years later to celebrate its writing. And so people really, I mean, in the occult community, the Book of the Law is kind of fairly well known.
Yeah. And celebrities, I heard that celebrities really study that book.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. And a lot of his people who followed Crowley studied it, tried to extract its codes and take it apart and figure out, there's parts in there like there shall be one who comes after. So a lot of these people are trying to carry on the Crowley tradition. But yeah, and you'll see it in the center when he created his rituals. One was called the Gnostic Mass. The center of the Gnostic Mass, or the table, is the Book of the Law. And so that was really the key element of Crowley in 1904. And it really didn't stop for Crowley. He just kept moving on and writing more books and associating with other occultists, and eventually ended up in the United States. He was in New York for almost the entirety of World War I. He actually came to the United States on the Lusitania, the sinking of which was what brought the U.S. into World War I on the side of the Allies. And so he came to the States, and really his job, I think he was working as an intelligence asset of the British government, working to get the U.S., which was a central component in the kind of UK strategy, was to get the U.S. in the war on their side. So he was actually kind of working around and talking, and actually worked for a pro-German propagandist by the name of Virek, and he wrote for a book called publication called The International, and also the other one was called Fatherland. And he writes about it. He wrote, Crowley was a voluminous author. He was just putting out documents. He wrote a 400 or 500 page autobiography called Confessions, and he details kind of his time in New York City, kind of subverting German propaganda and promoting English propaganda. He did in New York. He had this kind of ridiculous stunt where he got in a boat and rejected he supposedly ripped up his British passport and declared alliance with Ireland, who was trying to achieve independence, and actually was posted in the New York Times. So you can actually see that actual document of this kind of, and Crowley was known for doing these kind of publication stunts, and that was one of them. And so he was there, and there's a really good book called Secret Agent 666 that talks about his time as an agent in the UK. Yeah. And that author got documentation that said that the U.S. knew that Crowley was a British asset. And it's written there, like, we're cognizant of the fact that Crowley is an asset. And that's, so I think he was probably always working for some form of British intelligence prior to MI5 and MI6 from the beginning, from when he left Cambridge.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. One thing, this just jarred my memory. They said that all the James Bond movies were really about him.
Well, the original one for sure is. And Fleming, right? Ian Fleming was the author of the James Bond novels. And he worked as in British intelligence underneath the Admiralty. So kind of like the most important aspect of the British Empire was its fleet, right? So he was working for a guy, but he actually was in contact with Crowley. There's actually a letter Crowley sent to his boss when Hess, if you remember, Hess made this, he was number 3 in the Nazi party. He made this weird flight over to Scotland. If you remember that, he was captured. He was trying to contact what he thought were right-wing people to try to make an armistice with Germany. And he was like an occultist too. A lot of those Nazis were occultists, actually, Hitler as well. But and Crowley said, I'm offering my services to you if you want me to talk to him, and here's people that I know. And so that letter does exist. So Fleming, knowing of Crowley, when he wrote his first book, it was Casino Royale, that character, Le Chiffre, is based on Crowley. So when you see the bald guy at the table in the first movies, I don't know how he's reformed or replayed, but the original Casino Royale character, the shift translates to the cipher.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's definitely Crowley. So they knew Crowley. And, I mean, 007 goes back to John Dee, actually. So John Dee was
absolutely, yeah, sure does. That whole tie-in is just so fascinating, man.
Yeah, but, I mean, Fleming knew a lot of stuff. He was an elite family, banking family. He put a lot of information into his novels that was real. Like he talked about Le Cercle, which is literally a fascist organization, post-war fascist organization of wealthy people fighting against the communists. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in there. If you really unpack it, that's like another one, kind of like Harry Potter, where they're putting in stuff that's really kind of real. They're learning it from real world.
Is he the one that first mentioned the age of Aquarius?
Crowley, not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right.
He would call it the
But did he make emphasis on it? I mean, did he tell them how?
Not that much.
Okay, all right.
His ages were the ages of Osiris and the age of Horus. So he was trying to bring in the age of Horus, this Egyptian god, right? The hawk-headed god. And so the age of Osiris was a representation of Christianity, and Horus was this new magical future. So he didn't really talk about Aquarius per se, but he did talk about the birth of that child. So it was supposed to be the birth of this new aeon. And he actually predicted that it would take place in the 60s after he was dead. In a lot of ways, that 60s kind of revolution can tie itself to Crowley through Leary and some of these other characters. Like Leary said, he was carrying on the work of Aleister Crowley. So those are all kind of important tie-ins. But yeah, no, I don't remember the age of Aquarius being really any central tenet or concept within Crowley's writing.
Got you. What about, okay, so tell me about when because this is so disturbing. I hate to bring it up, but we have to talk about it. Where did the sex magic and the pedophilia come in at?
So when Crowley was doing his research, so he comes out of the Golden Dawn, right? So he learns all that stuff. But then when he comes out, he starts creating his own rituals. And what he finds is he likes to integrate into these rituals drugs and sex. So they become part of these rituals, that was kind of like his addition to the magical practices. This is what's happening. And that's actually what happened when he got involved with the OTO, which is a German secret society. They came and said, you're stealing my ideas, which they had come up with sex magic too. So he had it. So involved in these rituals would be sexual practices, and that's very obtuse intentionally, because it gets pretty graphic. But then he started his own. So he was in the U.S. He actually, once the Lusitania got sank, the U.S. went to war. He left the U.S. He says his work was done. He writes about it in Confessions. He comes back to England and decides to open his own kind of magical fraternity, kind of like the Golden Dawn, but he calls it the Temple or the Abbey of Thelema. And he chooses some kind of out of the way place in Sicily. and starts this up. And Crowley's always, like, part of his practice and part of kind of magical practice in general is to keep a diary. So you become and you write down your diary, what happened, what effect happened after this ritual, blah, blah, blah. But in there's something called the Magical Record of the Beast 666. And somebody went through there and read it. And in that, he talks about raping his girlfriend at the time, their baby, who's like 1 year old or 2 years old or something like that. So really graphic, bad, awful stuff. But there's all kinds of problems. Like Crowley himself said that kids should not feel ashamed about sexual activity. So he would encourage kids to watch that, young kids. And there's all kinds of records of these young kids who are at the Abbey of Thelema with the words they're talking about, what they learned from Crowley are off the charts. Like, I'm going to be the next beast after Crowley, the 6-year-old kid writes. And those are kind of in certain records. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's pretty fascinating because one of the girls who survived the Abbey of Thelema only lasted about 4 years before it was literally shut down by Benito Mussolini, kicked Crowley out of Italy. Crowley also got kicked out of France too. But one of the women from there actually made it all the way to the States, and she passed away in Berkeley, I think only like 10 years ago. So she had this long life in the States away from Crowley, but there was a weird tie-in. She made it all the way over here. So Berkeley, California. So just an interesting story. So that's really Crowley's. And I think that there's other, like the Book of the Law announces total freedom. And so anything that would, like any rules or laws against that freedom, Crowley didn't agree with. So that included pedophilia. So there's some very disturbing stuff there. But that's they talk about child sacrifice in some of Crowley's work, magic and theory and practice. That was my next
question. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, but they always kind of pro-Crowley people rely on other people not reading through Crowley stuff because there's so much writing. But I've had the misfortune of reading through it. So there's other references other than in magic and theory and practice. There's one in one of his rituals, which is called Liber 66, which 66, it's a multiple of 11. Talks about child sacrifice. The blood shall cover the altar as of wine. He writes about kind of in his poetic style. And then there's another book called The World's Tragedy. For Crowley, the world's tragedy is Jesus Christ. And in the intro of that, there's child sacrifice. That's how it starts. So he does hint at that. I mean, that's not a hint, but there are pieces of that in his writing, no doubt.
Oh, now, okay. So you jarred my memory about a lot of things. Okay. So let's start here. Let's go back to Italy. You said he got kicked out of there, but I'm wondering, since so many people are learning that the Vatican has a second, I say a dark side and a facade. They have a facade. Okay. And then they have a very, very dark side, supposedly. While he was there, did you find out anything about him having meetings or conducting any type of rituals or anything while he was there with the Vatican, in connection with the Vatican?
Not to my knowledge, but he was in Italy, and it's interesting because he spent 3 days in Rome watching the black shirts under Mussolini kind of take over power in Rome, right? So literal fascists took over power. Crowley's sending missives back. He's constantly writing. There's actually a lot of letters that are from Crowley to various people in libraries interspersed throughout the world. And so he's sending stuff back all the time, probably talking about what Mussolini did. But and that actual takeover in Rome inspired Hitler's putsch in Germany, believe it or not, because he had seen Mussolini take over. And he's like, well, let's us take over. Anyway, and the tie-ins between Crowley and Hitler are somewhat interesting. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But as far as the Vatican, he did not have that much attack. Although later there is, I can't remember his name right now, but he was a higher up in the Vatican who was a member of Crowley's OTO after he became head of the OTO in 1925 and put in other rituals that included the Book of the Law. There's been priests who were members of the OTO, and before the war, actually, Crowley, which is, people may not, anticipate this or be aware of that, but like a third of the OTO members were from Jewish background. So there's a lot of different things that may be counterintuitive in people involved in these secret societies, at least back then.
Yeah, let's talk about the Hitler and Crowley connection because I was going to ask you about that anyway. Um, Go ahead and tell me, like, when that started. Did Hitler? Um, s- just tell me. I'm
Well,
not
I
quite
mean,
sure what to ask it, but as you talk,
it's
I'll figure out
it's
something.
not that obvious. So when Hitler's coming up, right? So he gets done with the war, goes into a mental institution or a sanitarium, comes out, starts getting involved in politics, or he's probably, I mean, Crowley, I mean, Hitler's like Crowley. He's probably, he was working for intelligence when he started joining some of these groups and as a corporal and he giving information back to the handlers. But he was a member of the GWP, or it was really the Deutschland Arbeit Partei or something like that. But that guy was a member of the Thule Society, so kind of an occult order. And there were supposedly a lot of occultists involved when the NSDAP or the Nazi Party started. And
That didn't have anything to do with Crowley at the time,
I'm
or were
getting
they
there. I'm
already doing
working
it?
up to it. So these are occultists, but there was somebody by the name of Kunzel, her name was, who knew Crowley and was trying to get the Book of the Law to Hitler back in the 30s. And Crowley ended up in Germany from 1930 to 1933 as the Weimar Republic was waning and the Nazis came into power. So there's some arguments about what Crowley was doing in Berlin and doing around in Germany at that time. Crowley did showings of his art in Berlin, and he's probably still working for the British intelligence, trying to figure out what getting me information about what's going on in Germany. And so Hitler himself was familiar with. I cover this in my book, Children of the Beast. He kind of has similar ideas as Crowley. There's ideological similarities and overlapping because Hitler, if you remember the Riefenstahl documentary titled Triumph of the Will, so he had this whole idea of will, and that goes back to Crowley. And Thelema, right, is the will, the human will. So you kind of see this willpower theme between Hitler and Crowley, and as well as magic and dates and numerology and all kinds of other things, astrology that Crowley was into. Hitler was also influenced by astrology. But there's certain things in his speeches, like there's a quote from the Book of the Law that states, "Success is thy proof," and Hitler repeated that as well in some of his speeches, that kind of axiom, like it doesn't matter how you get there, you just want success overall. And so there's definitely some similarities between Hitler, and they kind of had the same, like Crowley wrote about his philosophy. He believed the slaves shall serve, right? That's actually a line from the Book of the Law. And Crowley believed in a natural aristocracy. He was not an egalitarian. He didn't care about democratic processes. And he believed that. And you could kind of see Hitler as implementing those ideas as somebody who believed in a slave state and believed in kind of an aristocracy and the kind of like the whole other mass of people. He was talking about a master race and all this other stuff. And I think that was right in line with kind of Crowley's political writings, although it was never something political that Crowley was able to implement. He was much more of kind of like a cult scholar or something like that. So there's definitely overlapping similarities. And there's actually kind of an interesting story. There was a guy who was a Crowley associate. I've actually held correspondence between Crowley and his name was Osmond Speer. And Hitler asked Speer to come to Germany and paint his portrait. So there's weird kind of connections there that I don't think have really been investigated in great detail, the connections between the OTO, Crowley. I mean, it is very odd that Crowley in 1925 becomes the head of a German secret society.
Yeah.
Even that. So, and Hitler actually ended up banning a lot of occult groups in like 1939 or something like that. And so a lot of those people were filtering around, and I don't, it's probably a function of language to not know as much as I should, but there's definitely some strange correlations and overlaps between Hitler and Crowley.
Yeah. Do you think Hitler was the second Antichrist?
Well, I would definitely put him in the Antichrist category. Like, I think that, I mean, that's another thing is like people say, oh, yeah, he's a Catholic, but he didn't operate like a Catholic or a Christian.
No, he didn't.
So I would say I was definitely an Antichrist figure. It's an interesting question because, some people see him as atavistic, an avatar or something, some other thing. But yeah, I see him as an Antichrist figure for sure.
Oh, for sure. Okay. Now, going back to the sex magic, we'll touch on that just a moment because this is what I heard. You can just kind of confirm it if you know this. That one thing he was trying to do is help people manifest things that they wanted. So they were using sigils and things like that,
Right.
and those would stand for whatever, like say wealth and other things. And so the idea there is to pass that intention straight into the subconscious mind to manifest it.
Yes,
Right at the
yeah.
point of orgasm.
In certain parts of that magic is to do, yes, that's one
Yeah.
of the things. It's
Yeah.
like we can go into, if you want to get into another thing that involves Crowley in France in the 20s, is he was involved in something called ECL, which
What
stands
is that?
for erotic comatose lucidity. So he had just gotten kicked out of Italy. He went back. He had a friend named Harris, who was also kind of a writer of pornographic, not well, at that time considered pornography. Today it'd be very tame, but he was staying with Harris, and then his wife was O'Hara, and she was friends with supposedly Barbara Bush's mom, right? So he was over there. But Crowley's practicing ECL. Well, the requirements of that form of sex magic is to have servitors, women, and then the main magician, and you basically are supposed, I think it's pretty graphic, you're supposed to have intercourse to the point that where you're in a coma, and then drift out of your body and come back and then write about it. So that's the part of comatose lucidity. And so that, and the times do match up between Barbara Bush's conception, birth, and when she got married to George Herbert Walker Bush in 41, I think it was. So it's 25. And you got to remember the time too. That was Paris is the city of light, and all the rich people in the U.S. wanted to be there. And I can't remember her original last name, but anyway, so she was supposedly operating as one of these servitors in the sex magic. And it's interesting too, because when Crowley was in New York, he was mixing with kind of like the cognoscenti, like the intellectual literary elite as well, and that same kind of thing seemed to happen in Paris at that time. So ECL, ritual, sexual servitors, so that's just another aspect. I mean, I fortunately know a lot more than that, but yeah, they're different components, but that's like another broader thing, and that's supposedly why Barbara Bush looks like Crowley. If you look at her, she has a huge head. She looks just like Crowley. And Crowley himself was actually of Irish extraction. He had kind of a large, I mean, his anatomy is he had a bigger head than his body, and he tried to cover it up by wearing like, scarves and things like that. But he looked like that and bald, and he looks a lot. If you put pictures of him next to Barbara Bush, it looks pretty damn similar. And then we can
I'm going to look at that now.
Yeah, well, you can go and then take that all the way, because the reason I wrote my book about 9/11 is that all these 11s are in the event of September 11th, 2001, which is an 11, right? So there's a correlation of these elites tinkering around, or they're not dabbling. They're very deep into the occult, and some of these rich families have that same ideology of the slave shall serve. I'm an elite, I'm an aristocrat, and all these peasants serve me. Dispensable peasants. Like I think Crowley said, we shall give them the quiet wisdom of the cattle. Like he knew what he was doing. He just wanted them to, the whole herd of the population, to kind of just be something like an asset, like a human resource you just glom off of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So let's kind of stay on that with these celebrities and some of these famous people, because I've heard, like, when you see, let's just take, for instance, Cat Williams. I don't know if this is true or not. This is what I heard, that the reason why he was getting put in jail and having all these, unfortunate things happen to him is because he wouldn't, participate in a sex magic ritual that they wanted him to participate in. He didn't want to do that anymore. And I heard that is something they do to, like, kind of charge their power or something. I'm not sure. Can you elaborate on that if you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, I think that they definitely are trying to get charged power through magic. Crowley himself talked about that. Like his magical rituals would give him power, and then he'd write a bunch of books. But as far as like the elite that people know, Jimmy Page is definitely influenced by the occult, and some are known and unknown. But there's a lot of rappers, a lot of this one guy, Absol. There's some of these other young Chance the Rapper. One wears Crowley shirts. So
is that Chance? I think it is Chance.
Man, I don't. It's one of them. It's a young-looking guy. Have you ever heard of Absol?
No, I haven't.
No, yeah, he's fully like a Crowley follower, and he has like "Do What Thou Wilt" on his back and a big tattoo.
Oh yeah. What about Drake? I've seen him wear.
I don't know.
Upside down crosses. There's pictures of him wearing it, like on red carpet. He wear upside down cross and.
I've heard stuff about Drake, like his introduction was like homosexual rape. I heard that's happened to that guy. That's a rumor. But so a lot of these strange things do happen. So these people, some of these sex rituals are very strange, and that's maybe what's happening when some of these people get inducted or initiated. Is actually, it's not just rape; it's a sex magical thing of power thing. So as far as like the celebrities who are known Crowley people. There's all kinds of these directors who know about Crowley and know about the occult. So, there's a lot out there. Yeah.
What about? I want to know if you've heard about I think it's called the Castle of Dark Mothers. I think.
Yeah, it's in like Belgium or something like that.
Yeah, it's a wicked place. Yeah. What do you know about it?
Well, I mean, I've heard things about that. There's rituals there. That there's elites there. I've heard that George Bush's 1,000 Points of Lights is a reference to that place when he made his 1,000 Points of Light speech. So I don't know kind of the totality, but, a lot of these big castles and stuff, there's weird things that go on in there. Like if you look at Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick, that was based upon that was actually filmed at a Rothschild castle. So, there's probably all kinds of weird occult elite magical stuff going on and probably that the Mistress of Darkness castle you're talking about or whatever is probably one of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of, because people are going to ask, okay, he was trying to contact something or something. Was he contacting demonic entities, fallen angels, something like that?
Absolutely. I think from the very beginning, I think probably when he got done with the Golden Dawn, that was what he was doing. So he, like his first big ritual that he did, he went and got this manor up on a lake in Upper Scotland. He called it Bullskin Manor. And he conducted this ritual that supposedly was going to take 6 months. It was the ritual. It was the Abra Melon ritual, and like entities infested that place. He said he saw demons out there. So that was kind of like his first. It was a Loch Ness, actually, the same place with the Loch Ness monster. Some people have tried to tie that to Crowley. I don't have any idea. But so that was the first one. Then we talked about Aiwass dictating the Book of the Law. There was another entity called the Wizard during the Alamantra. So he had these like magical, like maybe the conception of what magical ritual is to like, I'm going to do this for a half an hour and be done. Well, Crowley would have something called workings, which would take place over a long period of time. So he would call them different workings. One was Alamantra working, the Gerensis working, but they would take place over a week, and he would write all this stuff down about what he did, what happened, things he contacted. The Alamantra working he did in his apartment place, I think it's at 1 Washington Square in New York City. And the results of that, he wrote down kind of like the first picture of a gray alien that's kind of infused and,
You got to be kidding me. Wow.
No. So the first picture of the gray alien was drawn by Crowley in 1918, and it's at the end of his encyclopedia called The Blue Equinox. And you can actually just type it online, just say Crowley gray alien, and it's really the first. It's not a photograph. He called it lamb. So he kind of gave it, the word lamb is kind of like a derivation of llama, like the Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama.
But some of these workings and some of his astral travel, he's out talking to things, and writing about it and writing pictures about it. So I would say that he's constantly talking to entities, and in his diaries, he's like praying to Aiwass all the time. Oh, I see him upon the rocks. There is Aiwass, my benefactor, my holy guardian angel, blah, blah, blah. So, it's pretty remarkable. And then you can get into the whole gray alien ufology stuff, and it goes back to, in part, Crowley. You have to put it back to Crowley in part. And some of these other guys, like some of these guys who are involved in, UFOs are also involved in the occult in a big way. It's not a joke. So
wait. You can't skip over that way.
Okay. Well,
wait a minute. Okay, what do you mean? Okay, so no, you want to elaborate. Let me say this one real quick before you do that, because okay, so there's a clear divide on the alien phenomena. Anyway, from my experience in interviewing all these people, some of them believe that these are true beings coming from outside our planet, and highly intelligent, things like that. But then you'll talk to some of them who also tied in with the Bible and biblical prophecy and things like that, and they'll say, no, these aliens are demonic in nature. So that really shook me when you said that. But go ahead and tell me, can you tell me, do you know who, as far as these UFO researchers, are deeply involved in the occult?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the big books that features the gray aliens on it is called Communion, right? And that guy, Whitley Strieber.
Yeah.
Right. Go read some of his other works. He has all of the occult numerology down. So there's another book where he has all the 11s and everything. He was supposedly a member of the Process Church back in the 70s. So Strieber has his intellectual pedigree is much different than that. He also comes out of kind of a fiction, right? So he's writing fiction before he supposedly started writing nonfiction, which Communion is supposed to be, and it features the gray aliens. But he has. He did a movie called Wolfen. He wrote that, and in there, smiley faces. People have sent me those pictures. That kind of ties into the smiley face killers, which is another thing. But he's one, and they have this kind of thing back to the desert, this UFO thing that takes place in Death Valley or somewhere in the desert. And a lot of those guys, like Peter Levenda, is flat out occultist who wrote the Necronomicon, more than 99%
He talks about it all the time. Yeah.
So what's he doing hanging out with all these UFO people? So all these kind of Jacques Vallée, who thinks they're interdimensional beings, and all these other characters are there, and these occultists are swimming with, in the same waters very comfortably.
Wow. Now, someone, and I don't have it, maybe I can send it to you. I can't remember his name. He's a speaker. He's got blonde hair. David something.
Yeah, no, I know who you're talking about. It comes right to mind. Contact in the Desert is the thing.
Yeah.
No, I know exactly.
I read a long, the longest resignation letter ever, and he was on Gaia. And so he got sick of it. I guess he said that Gaia, the whole channel, was of an occult nature. They're pushing it, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Those markers are there. Like if you read Arthur C. Clarke, these guys know the occult numerology. It's all like the 11s, 77s, 93s. It's interspersed. So there's a tie-in between UFOs, occultism, science fiction, that there is definitely a vein there. And if you look, for example, 2001: A Space Odyssey, right, was based upon a book and a movie. So Clarke and Kubrick worked together, right? So what happened is Kubrick he kind of pulled a fast one on Clarke. He would not give him authorization to publish his book when Kubrick made his movie. So that book didn't have the same kind of fame. But in that book, he writes that the monolith that is really the thing that sets off the narrative of 2001: A Space Odyssey, very mysterious thing, but that monolith is 11 feet tall. So these guys are putting those things into, so-called fiction, which is really their real occult ideology, if that makes any sense. And Clarke was a pedophile, and Whitley, I'm trying to figure out what this is. Yeah, so there's a book by Whitley Strieber. I'll have to look it up, but he knows a lot more than just about ufology. I can assure you that.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very, very interesting conversation as usual, William. Before we go, please tell my listeners where they can find out more about you or anything else you're working on. Yeah,
I destroyed my Twitter account and my Facebook account. I do not regret that at all, but I am on MeWe, Gab, and Minds. So I'm posting there, and my books are available on my website, WilliamRamseyInvestigates.com, if you want a signed copy. And I'm actually just about to publish a book within the next week or two. So I don't have the full title yet, but look forward to putting that out. And then my documentaries, 5 of them, are on my Vimeo channel under William Ramsey. So if you're interested in that.
I'll have all those links in the show notes. William, many blessings to you, and I really appreciate your time.
Anytime. Glad to be with you again. It's great to talk with you.
To find out more about our guest and all others, please visit our website at mysteriousradio.com. And I want to give special thanks to our co-creator and executive producer, Kim Kyle, who brought this show to you today. And working hard behind the scenes, our team of 4, I want to thank them as well. Follow us on social media and share the show with others that may like the subjects that we cover. I am your host, K-Town, and you're listening to Mysterious Radio.